Now starting, all attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to the Alertus webinar series. My name is Jamie Underwood, Director of Marketing Communications at Alertus Technologies. Today's session will provide best practices in reviewing, updating, and testing your emergency preparedness plan. We ask that you please hold all questions to the end of the webinar. However, feel free to type any questions in the chat box during the presentation, and we'll be sure to come back to those during the Q&A at the end of the session. This webinar is being recorded, so please email marketing@alertus.com if you're interested in receiving presentation slides or video from today's webinar. I would now like to turn it over to today's webinar presenter, Ben Brewer, Director of Professional Services at Alertus.
Thank you, Jamie, and good day, everybody. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us for today's discussions on best practices and things that we've observed while working with and within the emergency notification system sector. Today, by and large, we're just going to be focusing on a discussion that centralizes on best practices that I've observed over the past 18 years or so, and talk a little bit about our system to begin, a little bit of my background, the best practices which may kind of seem to flow in a systemic type function as you look at your emergency notification system as something that has its own life cycle. But I think you'll see as we go through that discussion that best practices can be found in a variety of places as we own and operate these systems. Just a little bit about me. I've been in the emergency management sector for roughly the past 30 years, 25 of them in the operator space, largely facilitating command and control to support emergency and crisis management activities. The last 6 years I've had the privilege of working within the industry sector and working with emergency notification systems providers to support, fellow operators that are out there in the system. I've owned and operated emergency notification systems for roughly the past 18 years, although going back to the early 80s and working with giant voice systems, it largely tallies close to 30 years all told. But with these types of systems, the systems that allowed us to really, for the first time, automate the notification process and step away from the manual telephone trees that we used to use to notify all individuals across an organization and be able to take that laborious hours-long activity and compress it into, a matter of minutes and leveraging various technologies. We're realistically looking at roughly the past 17 to 18 years. I began as an operator of these systems back at that time and matured to, within my own career, to where I was evaluating systems across my organization. It was a global system. And ultimately, the last 3 years of my operational career, I owned the emergency notification system for my organization, which was comprised of roughly 245 operating locations around the globe, supporting 800,000 to 850,000 employees. And subsequent to retiring from that job, I had the opportunity to step into industry and have been privileged to work with a lot of operators and people that are very mature in the space, as well as taking their first steps into the emergency notification system space, to learn an awful lot on how they view these types of technologies within their organizations and assist them in leveraging the technology to achieve the best effect. A little bit about Alertus in the event that we have anybody on the webinar that is new to Alertus and just starting to explore Alertus. Alertus Technologies is based out of Beltsville, Maryland, and has more than 10 years of experience specializing in emergency notification systems for campuses and other large area high occupancy facilities, including medical centers, military bases, government facilities, industrial and corporate facilities, a very large, dynamic, and a very diverse client base, as you might imagine. The Alertus system itself is designed to tie together all potential notification assets throughout an institution to ensure comprehensive, unified notification, offering a consistent form of messaging and streamlined ease of activation, as well as affordably retrofitting existing facilities presently, that are out there, some of the dated infrastructure that do not have any in-building notification capabilities inherent to that structure. While this webinar is not focused on the capabilities of the Alertus system, as Jamie indicated, both her and I, as well as other members of the Alertus staff, are here to assist you in furthering your understanding of our system, and we'll provide you with some contact information at the close of this webinar. But for now, we'll go ahead and transition into best practices. The very first best practice that sprung to mind, and something that's very near and dear to my heart, is ensuring that you know and have the ability to protect your emergency notification system requirement. And it's very important that you view your notification requirement as something that is not just a momentary exercise, but something that exists throughout the life cycle of your organization to support your organization. It is largely something that is non-static and should be highly flexible and dynamic and able to adapt within accepted parameters that are defined by your organization. When looking at this as a best practice, there are many different contributors to achieving a well-defined requirement, and something that is very much in step with your organization, not only today but in the future as well. And being able to articulate that requirement starts very frequently with any other discovery exercise that many of us have to go through in business. It's all about defining what types of events would require the activation of an emergency notification system. When I activate that notification system, who is it that I have to notify? Are there timing constraints with regard to getting that notification out to intended recipients? And then ultimately deciding how that message has to be disseminated. A lot of that ties directly into obtaining and developing an understanding of your organization's operational culture. Not only day-to-day how you operate Monday through Friday in a steady state, but also how you operate in response to a crisis. Is it very similar, or is it diametrically opposed to your day-to-day operations? Understanding your communication strategies within your organization day-to-day and how those translate into that crisis state are very important to understanding exactly how you would articulate the how you would go about the how with regard to your requirement you would go ahead or go about achieving your emergency notification strategy. Another contributing aspect in that obviously is your organizational culture and the dynamics of your campus or your facilities. And this ties into everything from your parking lot flow, how people arrive at the workplace, how they obtain access into the workplace, how they flow through the workplace, how they communicate within the workplace, things of that nature. With regard to organizational culture, some of the things that we would recommend taking a look at would be, what types of communication systems are in place currently? Do you have an existing PA system? Do you work within a facility where, by and large, office spaces are enclosed or closed off from common areas? What types of common areas do you have? What types of behaviors occur, and how frequently do they occur within those spaces? What types of tools, communication tools, do your personnel have while they are transiting and working within those types of spaces? And then taking a look at the actual infrastructure itself, whether it be an outdoor area, trying to define how would you communicate, let's say, an evacuation order to a large open space, looking for obstructions to that type of communication, all the way down to the way communication could potentially flow throughout the corridors of your building. What is your building constructed of? Do you have a large open working areas where there are cubicles, or is there a preponderance of enclosed office spaces? Do your corridors flow in a straight line, or are there all different types of various angles? Having that understanding of your organization, the facility, the culture that the people have as they move throughout and work within, and then obviously the impacts that the construct of that environment would have on your communications is very important to understanding and better being able to articulate your requirement, because any system or any capabilities that you decide to articulate as a part of that requirement obviously must be able to operate within that culture and within that environment. Another big piece of understanding your requirement is actually stepping back and evaluating your organization to see what types of tools already exist, whether it be a widespread public address system, the latest and greatest in fire alarm control panel capabilities with enunciators, whether you have digital signage throughout the building, LED marquees as you enter the organization or the campus area. All these various capabilities, whether they are unified currently or not, should be evaluated to understand, hey, what's out there that I can already leverage? And hopefully, as you work through things, you have the ability to bring these capabilities back and tie them together with one another to achieve those synergies. Once you've gone through this exercise and you've really had the opportunity to brainstorm and sit down and look at what exists, what you need to do, who you need to alert, when you need to alert them, how you're going to go about doing it, you need to have the opportunity to kind of step out of a small project team that you may have found yourself working within, whether it just be solely isolated to operations or whether it be consisting of members from across the organization. As part of articulating your requirement, you've got to achieve the buy-in across the organization with your key stakeholders. And best practice, obviously, as you're articulating that requirement, is to capture within that requirements document the stakeholders from the various points within the organization, provide them an opportunity to review and provide meaningful feedback into the requirements document, and then ultimately coordinate it across the organization to ensure that you have evened out any bumps as much as you can, at the very least, and achieve that buy-in, so that as you go forward with working with industry partners and things of the like, you have a unified front from within the organization as to, hey, this is what is required with regard to our emergency notification communication strategy moving forward. And as you begin to work with industry partners, whether it be 1, 2, or more, that you begin to socialize this requirement with, a big part of that is not only getting an understanding of exactly what they can do, and arguably you're likely going to come across industry partners that are going to present you with capabilities that perhaps had not been apparent, perhaps they're emerging, perhaps they're on the horizon, that you may want to consider as you move forward. But ultimately, when you're working with industry partners, a part of this best practice is staying true to your requirement and working with industry partners and identifying a solution that wraps around your requirement versus forcing you to reshape your requirement around the capabilities of a potential notification system that you bring into your organization. Now, once you've got your requirement down, documented, agreed upon, you've got your buy-in, and you're beginning to move forward with industry partners, and you're introducing technologies into the organization, integrating the solution is definitely a key to any long-term and lasting successes you have with regard to your crisis communications plan. One of the first things that we recommend doing is sitting down and really getting into your crisis communications plans, as well as any emergency operations plans or other types of plans that would support these types of activities within your organization. In all likelihood, as you were fleshing out your requirement, an awful lot of these crisis communications requirements had bubbled to the surface. This is really your chance to get into the documentation and assure that the solution, as you begin to implement it across your organization, to ensure that that solution fully supports these existing plans, and where necessary, you take the opportunity to introduce new verbiage, new operating paradigms and requirements into these plans to support how the introduction of the emergency notification system is going to impact and assist you all in achieving your desired outcomes when communicating with your intended recipients. Now, in addition to your plans, most organizations will have plans that are supported directly by procedures. You have the plan saying this is what we are going to do in response to X. The standard operating procedures or checklists or operating instructions really provide you with this is the how as to how we are going to go about achieving that desired end state. These are the steps that we are going to take from point A through Z to achieve the desired outcome. It's very important when you're taking a look at introducing an emergency notification into your organization to recognize the types of circumstances in which operators are going to be called upon to activate a notification scenario. Sometimes they'll be very low stress environments, and sometimes the environment will be chock full of chaos and very, very stressful. For example, it could be anything ranging from a mass transit accident, whether it be an aircraft accident, a hazardous material release that is adversely impacting your population, an approaching hurricane, tornado warning, the list goes on and on. But for each of these types of events, there's a differing level of internal stress, if you will, that will be brought to bear on your operators that are on the front lines of implementing these plans on your behalf. So the ability to take a look at your standard operating procedures in existing checklists and really capture for the operator what it takes from the time you receive word that a potential threat has occurred and a decision is made to activate a specific scenario, notification scenario, provides them with the steps to be able to walk through it logically, from accessing the user interface, logging into the user interface, selecting the alert notification, making any modifications, activating, monitoring, etc. And while it may seem redundant, it is most certainly a recognized best practice to ensure that in those instances where the stress overwhelms the ability to think of what the next step is, having that documented process right there in front and a ready access for your operators is very important. Now, while the next one is pre-plan, it seems like it's sort of a step back, but in essence it really isn't. It ties very closely into the other two in that as you are taking a look at your existing emergency operations plans and other plans that this system will support, is to sit down and plan within the alerting system itself how the alerting system will support the achievement of that plan. And most oftentimes it is through the development of notification groups of either personnel or devices, as well as the development of pre-planned or preset alert notification templates, so that when an event occurs, the operator does not have to put together the notification on the fly. The majority of it exists. Sometimes you'll want to lock in the text to where only certain aspects of it can be changed. Other times you want to be able to give your operators a little bit freer hand to change, to adapt to the situation. But this provides you the opportunity in advance of the chaos to be able to set the system at a logical starting point for your operators so that they're best set up for success in the event that an incident does occur that requires its use. A big part of the pre-planning part is also configuring the behaviors of the system itself. One example would be a desktop notification, reaching across your organization, and when an alert is triggered, taking over the desktop. Well, one of the things that you need to consider as you're pre-planning and configuring is the actual desktop client behavior. How do you want that to behave when it comes up onto the screen? Do you want it to take over the whole screen, populate just a segment of the screen? Do you want it to come across as just a ticker type notification at the bottom or the top of the screen? What types of colors? Do you want any dynamic type text in there that perhaps flashes any embedded URLs, imagery, or links to videos, things of that nature? That's all part of the configuration, and that applies on the software side as well as it does for many of the hardware endpoints, whether it be volume levels for giant voice and public address type systems, to LED patterns and intensities on marquees and other endpoints like the alert beacon, to include siren tones, intensity, duration of that intensity, what it does throughout, how that device, whether it be on a software or hardware side, how that device behaves throughout the life of that particular alert. And of course, once you get everything configured, you need to evaluate it. Take a look at it, and really, while something may make sense on paper as you're planning it out and you're getting it input into the system and getting the system configured, actually implementing it and having an opportunity to observe it may yield a different outcome. So you need to provide yourself with the opportunity to evaluate that configuration and reconfigure it again as need be. And then the final step of the integration is really the effort that is required to inform your population that, hey, we've got this system. These are its capabilities. This is what it's designed to do. This is our vision for its use. This is how it will be used. These are the types of behaviors that we hope to see from the intended recipients in response to specific notifications. And then obviously to take a more involved effort to educate those that will be a little bit more closely involved with the system, which ties into training your operators and the system administrators. In this area, we typically recommend a crawl, walk, run type approach to training versus just an initial training session where operators could potentially, walk away feeling as though they'd been hit full blast with a fire hose. Ease them into it, familiarize them with the system in very short sessions, providing them with an overview. Again, kind of getting back to the vision, the requirement. This is what the system was brought on to do. This is what it was brought on to support. This is your role in helping us achieve that vision, and this is how the information system, the emergency notification system, goes about behaving. So you kind of give it that 20,000-foot overview look without really diving deep into the weeds. It gives folks an opportunity to wrap their minds around exactly what it is that they are being asked to do. It gives them a generalized feel for the tool with which they'll be able to perform these types of duties, and it sets them up for further successes as the training dives deeper, getting into the walking stage. And that's really where you get into the detailed user and the system administrator training, diving into all of the specific nuances within the system user interface, talking through how alerts are generated, how they can be preset within the system, how you go about managing groups, updating groups, introducing new groups, leveraging reports within the system, things of that nature, all the way across the gamut and into, obviously, for those that have system administrator privileges, how they would go about creating user roles, user accounts, tailoring accesses within there, and dialing things down. Let's say, for example, you have a campus that has a north and a south side with operational staff for the solely focus on the north, while another operational staff focuses on the south. Training that system administrator on how they can set up that system so that those on the north side of the campus can only activate those types of scenarios that are specific to that area, while those on the south can only do so within their area of responsibility. So you're really getting detailed. You're down on the ground and really learning the terrain of the system, how it functions, how to move around within it. But it doesn't really speak to assuring that those operators are fully qualified. At the end of a user or system administrator training, you may walk them through some exercises, but it's not necessarily always in a structured and evaluated state. And one of the recommendations that we have is to take it that next level into a formalized qualification training session, where you sit those individuals down with a scripted, the evaluator has a script, and they walk the operator through the process of not only interfacing with the emergency notification system, but also dealing with the event as it unfolds, and how the activation of that system nests within that process. So, for example, if there were a hazardous material spill as part of your qualification training, part of that qualification training may entail the operator referring to the appropriate checklist and then walking through that checklist, either simulating or exercising certain notifications that occur in advance of activation of the automated system, and then ultimately, ensuring that they're fully qualified to operate the emergency notification system throughout the life cycle of the training event. And largely, that's all about introducing and maintaining realism. I'm a big proponent of practicing the way you play and training the way you fight. And obviously, anytime that we come face to face with a crisis situation, if we are asking our operators to do something in a crisis situation that does not mirror what they traditionally do, day to day in a steady state, non-crisis world, oftentimes you're introducing an opportunity for confusion and potentially failure. So we always recommend that the training events that you put together closely mirror what they would do in the real world, and closely mirror, realistic scenarios that they would potentially have to deal with while sitting at the operational desk. Now, within your system, again, this kind of ties all the way back to establishing your requirement and taking a look at what already exists within your organization, as well as keeping in touch with new and emerging capabilities that are introduced into your organization. Leveraging and keeping in touch with technology, leveraging those varied capabilities is very important. And when talking about emergency notification, understanding the organization's culture and observing the people and the way they move throughout the space, and any distractions that might be in place that might keep them from hearing a notification that is voice only, or from seeing a notification that is visual only. The ability to reach out and leverage those varied capabilities and tie sound, visual, and engagement together is very important. It provides you with the opportunity, if somebody is walking through the space and they have their iPod turned on and are listening to music or podcast or what have you, and they cannot necessarily hear the initiation of a notification. Obviously, the existence of bright flashing lights, whether it be an LED marquee, an alert beacon with its LEDs active, or a digital display being overridden in a corridor, those are very important attention getters. And the same goes vice versa. Somebody could be engaged in looking at something in social media and not necessarily see that an LED strobe has been engaged or a digital signage alert has popped up, but that sound, having the ability to either hear a verbal notification or a tone to alert them that they need to heighten their awareness a little bit, is very helpful. And then from an engagement perspective, it ties back into understanding who knew what and when did they know it. Receiving that acknowledgement from the audience that they have received the alert. Typically, on a hardware device, it could be as simple as depressing the two black buttons that you see on the alert beacon there on your screen, or perhaps clicking on the acknowledge key of a desktop alert. but that gets you the engagement, so you have a better feel and a better understanding of who received the message and when did they receive it. Not necessarily what they did with it, but at least those first 2 points. Integration and mobility. The ability to integrate your system and to continuously integrate your system throughout its life cycle is most certainly a best practice, because it fosters synergies, and by unifying systems one to another, it creates an awful lot of operational efficiency. Many of our organizations operate today in resource constrained environments, whether it be temporary or something that we've dealt with for years on end. But the ability to tie systems together to where the behaviors and perhaps even some of the activations are automated without that demand for a physical external resource to attend to it and take action, obviously creates an efficiency by allowing an individual to remain focused on other aspects of a situation as it develops. We oftentimes encourage our clients to think outside the box and to really look within, again, looking back at their organizational culture, look at some of the various information tools that are leveraged. If there is an information tool, let's say, for example, you subscribe to NOAA weather feeds, what types of data are you looking for in there? How can we leverage those in a threat watcher capacity to trigger preset alerts, without having to engage in, I've got to make sure that person A receives the alert, person A communicates the alert to person B, who then approves. If you have the ability to leverage and integrate fully with that system, understanding the behaviors of both, and tie them in and foster an automated process whereby cues are provided from one system to another that elicit behaviors, obviously the synergy and the potential benefits of the integration are very noticeable, very tangible to your organization. Also take a look and see how you can integrate either physically your notification system with existing components that you might not think of as an emergency notification per se. Let's say, for example, a facility alarm system that has a duress button at a receptionist desk. Is there a way to tie that system in to where if that duress button is ever depressed, it not only activates the alarm system but also activates your emergency notification system to perform specified behaviors, not necessarily notify everybody across your facility that something's occurred at the lobby, but potentially heighten awareness to other areas that perhaps aren't serviced by the other system. And then, of course, looking for opportunities to integrate software to software via an application programming interface and come up with that unified approach to being able to leverage the capabilities of both systems to the best effect for you. And then tying into the last one, I don't think mobility can be understated in today's culture. Many of us have smartphones, have tablets that we use in the execution of our daily duties, and to ignore the ability to reach out and touch those types of devices is to ignore a very, very potent capability that already exists within your organization. Many organizations have a bring your own device policy. In my opinion, it is very important that as you are looking at ways to integrate and leverage mobile technologies, that you step back and take a look at what are the policies and procedures within my organization, what types of devices are out there, what types of devices are permitted for use, how are they connected? Are they connected to the organizational network, or are they connected to the World Wide Web through the various internet service providers? Do we have hybrid solutions out there? Taking a look at the use policies, for personal devices in particular, can they be used to receive notifications of a business type nature? And finding those opportunities where it's feasible to integrate and to leverage these types of technologies via your emergency notification system is very potent, because it doesn't tie a person to a specific location. and it enhances the ability, your ability, as you're implementing these emergency notifications, to protect life, to try to reduce the loss of property, and to try to reduce the impact to the environment. And ultimately, by leveraging mobile technologies, you're really enhancing your continuity of operations within your organization. Because many of these technologies today, you not only have the ability to receive emergency notifications via mobile technology, but many systems, the alert system included, have the ability to activate alerts and notifications via mobile technology. So in the event that your system's operators, wherever they may reside within your facility, in the event that they must evacuate their primary operating location, they have the ability to carry on with their duties while they are relocating, vice your organization having to endure, a 10 to 30 minute lag in notification while the operators relocate to what is hopefully at least a warm site, spin up operations there, and re-engage on a given situation. Next, we always like to talk about testing your system. Testing the system, an emergency notification system really shouldn't be a fire and forget type system, or a system that you approach haphazardly just to fill a square, if you will. They require an awful lot of care and feeding from the perspective of, it's out there, I've got it deployed, is it working appropriately on this date, this specific date? A lot of our clients that we've consulted with regard to how they go about testing their system, we see a wide variety of approaches. Some with very rigorous crisis environments, tested as frequently as 3 times a day during shift change, and it's basically a very non-invasive type test that they walk through the user interface, activate a test scenario, and it provides feedback to a single or just a small group of endpoints to ensure that system is working. And we have other organizations that test it once a week, typically tied in with their outdoor notification, giant voice type systems, for storm notifications, things of that nature, actually tying weekly system tests into, the Friday at noon, we're going to put out the test tone type event. And then others, tested a little bit less frequently. But ultimately, the best practice is to ensure that you test the system at a frequency that meets the level of risk for your particular organization. And when I say the level of risk for your particular organization, it really comes down to the risk being what happens if from test point on Monday to crisis event on Thursday, that system becomes ineffective for whatever reason. Perhaps there's been a software update or a software patch update or anything that could prevent full efficiency of that system. Taking a look at that risk and identifying what the residual risk is, what the acceptable level of risk is within your test plan, and then testing the system based on that risk assessment. It's very important. But again, just very simple tests, typically with static groups, and at a frequency that best fits into your organization. We also recommend that organizations periodically test the system in a scenario-based exercise or event, and something that's realistic, whether it be a tornado warning or an evacuation or a shelter-in-place type event. We recommend that these exercises be put together, that they be broadcast, typically to let the intended recipients know that something's going to be going on. Doesn't necessarily need to include all the specifics, but at least let them know that the system is going to be tested on a certain date. Deploy a team of observers across your facility to observe system performance as one aspect, and also to observe what happens when the system is triggered within the organizational culture. How do the intended recipients behave? Are they eliciting behaviors that are desired or required for that type of event? And these types of events, because they're typically a little bit more robust and far more scripted, they provide you with a really solid methodology for diving into your system and evaluating the alert data that is provided subsequent to any alert notification, and ultimately processing that data to glean the critical information that's important to again working with, informing, educating your served population, as well as making enhancements to the way the system behaves and the manner in which it is operated. We also recommend that after these types of events that you sit down as a group and hot wash the event, walk through it, make sure that you know the ins and outs of when scenarios were activated. Were they activated in a timely manner once the input was received? Did the system behave accordingly? Did all the endpoints elicit desired behaviors, whether it be tone, light, text, that they were programmed to elicit? And again, getting back to your intended recipients, did they react to the scenario in the manner in which you had hoped? And ultimately, when you walk through all these processes, you have the ability to sit back and evaluate the system, not only on that specific test event, but you should do so after every real-world event activation that you have, whether it be something as small as a tornado warning or an adverse weather warning, to something a little bit more dramatic, whether it be a hazardous materials spill or release, to up to and including an active shooter or something of that nature. We recommend that you sit back and take a look at the manner in which the system performed, as to whether it supported directly the plans as they were laid out, and provide yourself the opportunity and the flexibility to make the modifications to the system that are required to get it to behave within the parameters that you've defined in your requirement. And a part of that obviously is leveraging the system itself to take a look at reports and data that are available, whether it be a system that actively monitors the end state of all your devices, to taking a look at a daily digest of activities throughout a particular event as part of your after action reporting. And also, we definitely recommend, from the active monitoring perspective, if you have a system that has the ability to notify key personnel of system events, whether it be an alert activation to which perhaps they are not an intended recipient, an alert cancellation, or something that is going on within the infrastructure that is adversely impacting the system, we definitely recommend that you leverage those types of capabilities to understand what the external influences might be on system behaviors and system performance. Now, as you may have noticed as I went through that discussion, we kind of cycled back and forth a little bit to various best practices, from the start of defining your requirement all the way up through training, testing, tweaking the system, evaluating and modifying the program. In addition to really having a well-crafted and articulated requirement, one of the more important things that you can do to support your emergency notification program, your crisis communications plan, is to view your emergency notification program as a cycle, something that has its own life cycle. And it is it's not necessarily that each of these activities is going on in isolation at any given time, but various activities can be going on simultaneously with one another with regard to a new threat could have been escalated during this year's business impact analysis and risk assessment type process in support of your business continuity planning, to planning how the system's going to react to that, training everybody again, making sure that they're aware, hey, we've got something new, this is a new requirement of the system, this is how it's going to behave, this is your level of activity in ensuring that the system performs, testing, again, making those modifications not only on a system basis but on a programmatic basis, and cycling back and always being in touch with your requirement. Because at the end of the day, if you set a if you set an emergency notification system requirement in stone and something that is not flexible or adaptable to your organization, in all likelihood, you'll wind up introducing an awful lot of frustration for yourself, as you attempt to manage the program and ensure that the technologies stay in touch with meeting those types of needs. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Jamie to see if we have any questions.
Thanks, Ben. So we would like to open up the floor to any questions. Just a reminder, you can use your chat box to actually type your question in, and Ben will be happy to answer those. Also, just a quick reminder, we do have several upcoming webinars. There will be one later this month on communication systems for preparatory and boarding schools. That should be a really good session that we're looking forward to hosting. We also have 2 sessions coming up in December. First, in early December, a best practices in the event of an active shooter. Ben will also be moderating that session. We have some great panelists on board for that, individuals from Winthrop University, Washington University in St. Louis, as well as California State University in San Marcos. So that will be a really great session. And finally, later in the month in December, we'll be doing a product overview webinar. If you'd like to get a better sense of the Alertus system and how it works and functions together, we'll be covering that in the December 16th webinar. And it will also have a nice focus on the fire panel interface, one specific product offering that we do have. If you are interested in learning more about those webinars or would like to register, you can do so at www.alertus.com/Alertus webinar series. Likewise, if you'd like to learn more about Alertus and our products, you can go to our website, which is also listed here. And finally, we are recording this webinar. We're also able to provide presentation slides if you're interested. If you are, please email us at marketing@alertus.com. As of right now, it doesn't look like we have any questions. If you do have a quick question, please go ahead and enter that in the chat box, and we will be able to address those right now. So it does look like we just had a question come through. The question is, Ben, are there any frameworks available to develop scenarios to guide our team?
One of the resources that I've seen most frequently used out there, if you navigate out to ready.gov, ready.gov has got a business continuity or continuity of operations section out there that I myself have found very helpful from a research perspective, but at the same time I know a lot of clients that I've consulted with that are integrating their system into their business continuity plans. They've found some very solid frameworks out there. So I'd recommend ready.gov.
Excellent. Thank you, Ben. And it doesn't look like we have any other questions at the moment. I would just like to remind people that if you do have questions following the webinar, feel free to email Ben directly, or again, also email marketing@alertus.com. We'll be happy to facilitate that process for you.